Al, if there's something happening in the hobby that I don't know if people really understand the magnitude of what I'm seeing and how important I think it is for the future of the sports card hobby, there's one category in particular that has been exploding, and I think it's going to continue on. I'm going to explain why. There's a variety of different factors that have fallen into place here that I think are really, really positive. Before I dive in, if you have not ever submitted with PSA, grading friends is not getting any cheaper. The number one grader in the space is PSA. Take $25 off your first submission. The SCD25 promo code at the shipping and billing screen is just a one card minimum. Try them out, $25 off. If you have ungraded cards and you're trying to figure out, should I send this card in for grading? What are the population counts for this? You can very easily scan that card and the PSA app will pull up not only population reports to show you how many 8s, how many 9s, how many 10s, but it'll also show you current pricing for those particular cards, all at your fingertips on the PSA app. Also, don't forget to join the legion of SlabMags folks out there that are buying SlabMags for display purposes and UV protection. You can't display any better than a SlabMag. I'm one of the only ones left on the internet with a code to get you 10% off your entire SlabMags order. It is SportsCardDad at checkout. Don't forget your SlabMags. I've got links in the video description as well as in the pinned comments. To understand the present, it makes a lot of sense to look at the past. And what did the past look like? How did we get here? And I can tell you, just going back as a kid in the junk wax era, yes, baseball cards were very, very popular. Ken Griffey Jr. just hitting the market, the 89 Upper Deck, the first glossy cards. I mean, there was all sorts of crazy going on in the late 80s, early 90s. That was very exciting in the sports card hobby. But one major thing happened, and I talked to Dr. Beckett going back a couple of months ago when I interviewed him about this. What really changed in our hobby that really exploded things and really grew this thing out to the masses at that time was the first Beckett basketball card monthly and the first football card monthly for Beckett that came out. I believe both of them came out in 1990. Maybe one was late 1989. But I remember the first basketball issue came out in, I believe, April of 1990. I was 9 years old. And once that happened, me and my buddies that were buying 89 Pro set, and we were trying to get a hold of 89 Score football cards, we were off to the races every single month. That was just as much a part of my hobby, was getting the Beckett monthly magazines, as it was actually collecting the cards and hanging out with my buddies and trading cards, trying to find these cards. It was huge. It was a really big deal. And it's not to say that people weren't collecting football and basketball cards before 1990. They were, but it wasn't even close to being on the same scale. And really what you saw there is early 90s, you're starting to see innovation. Pinnacle came out with great football cards in the early 90s. I remember trying to get Pinnacle cards. They were fantastic. There was a lot of really cool glossy style cards that came out in the early 90s. And I know when people are like, okay, they're glossy. Well, it used to just be cardboard. It used to just be regular cardboard. Now you're getting glossy cards. Now you're getting different designs. The early 90s really set the stage for the mid to late 90s, which of course is what a lot of people collect now. And you've got numbered cards mixed in, really cool inserts and parallels that came out in the mid to late 90s. But the early 90s really set the stage for all of that. Now, what do you hear from hobbyists when a new person is coming in? They're like, hey, what should I buy? What should I collect? What do you always hear from people that have been in the hobby for a long time? They'll say, collect what you love. What sports do you like? What sports do you follow? Well, that brings me to the most popular sport in North America right now, which is football. It's the NFL. Football dominates as far as who's watching, who's paying attention to it, the fan base, the TV viewership, all that stuff. It is dominated by the NFL. It's not to take away from the MLB, which is also very popular. It's not to take away from the NBA, but the NFL rules. Now let's look at football cards. Now, this is not a video where I'm saying it's a great idea to go out and buy the new quarterback prospect that just came out. There's a lot of money lost on new quarterbacks. So let's just be clear. We're actually going to look at it in a different way, which I think is really important when we're looking at how are we going to really grow this hobby over time, and that is the collector base. When I look at the National, when I look at card show vlogs, when I'm looking at the Topps Rip Nights, I am seeing a ton of families and young people. From my own experience at the National last year, there was a family that walked up, mom, dad, and there was a kid, maybe, 10, 11, 12 years old. And he walked up and said, hey, are you buying cards? Are you trading? And I was like, yeah, let me see what you have. And I was thinking to myself, if he's got anything that's Saints related, I'm going to buy it for my son. I've got a 10-year-old. So he pulls out of a huge stack of slabs that came out of his case, Chris Olave rookie card and a PSA 10. I think it was an orange numbered card. And we looked up comps and we made a deal on it. But the one thing that I've noticed, if I'm looking at the young people that are getting into the hobby, there are a lot of baseball card collectors for sure, young people, but there is a ton of football card collectors. And why is that? Well, it's because their mom, dad, they watch football. They've got a favorite team. And so that's a natural segue into, okay, we watch football cards. So what I'm seeing are really just young people that were like myself, going back 30 years, that are buying into football, basketball. I had baseball cards too, but really my passion was around football cards. And now what I'm seeing is, okay, there is going to be a next generation. I'm looking at all of these shows. I'm looking at all the participants in the hobby right now. And I can see very clearly that there's a certain percentage of these folks that are in the hobby today that will come back. They're going to come back in 15, 20, 25 years. Some of them will get out. Some of them will stay in. But a lot of these kids will get out. But they've got that nostalgia. If we look back, and I've been thinking about this, this channel and a lot of this hobby for me, we're talking about a 4 to 5 year period of my childhood. Really, it was age 8 to 13 where I did a lot of this card collecting and collectible stuff. And now I hearken back to those times. We're talking about a relatively short period of time in my life, and probably your life as well, that we are attached to, that makes up a big part of our life now. And I think that's really interesting to note. For a lot of these young people, they might only be in for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but it's going to make a huge difference, in their life. They're going to have kids one day. They're going to have disposable income later on in life. Be a certain percentage of them that come back and want to operate as a 40-year-old. And that is really important. It's important to not just see guys that are my age and older at all the card shows. That would be probably not great news. But that's something that has completely changed over the last few years. A couple years ago, my wife went to a national with me and she was like, wow, there are way more moms and kids here than there were going back a couple years prior. And I think a lot of that has to do with social media. When I was a kid, the social media was Beckett Magazine. You could go to shows, sure, but it wasn't the same sort of vibe. It wasn't the same sort of environment as what you have today. It's very, very different. It's a different time, I think, in general. The other thing that's different is you don't have sleepy small companies like Pinnacle or even Topps back then. That was a small company. Now you've got conglomerates. You've got Fanatics. You've got eBay. You've got collectors, PSA. You've got large companies in this space. And I know people get frustrated with Fanatics, Topps. I definitely do, and some of these large companies in the space. But it's important if you want to have a growing environment or just one that maintains, you've got to have kind of some of these deep pockets that are investing. We now have large companies in the space really reinvesting. And really what this is too, when you look back in time, when we were 10 years old, when I was 10 years old, you didn't have the internet to sell cards on. It was extremely limited. Your buying, selling, trading options were extremely limited. Now we're all grown up and now there's all this technology and you're seeing a bunch of 40-year-olds like myself and older that are starting these businesses and creating these marketplaces, making it easier to buy, sell, trade, grade, and all these different things that we do. How's that going to look in the next 10, 15, 20 years? I don't think it's really going to slow down. I think there's going to be more and more people, but I think it's going to be even more so as we move forward. Football cards as a whole are really interesting. The ultra modern stuff, it's kind of similar to any ultra modern sport or product. You're going to have new prospects that come out. 90% of them are going to fall by the wayside, but there's going to be the hype and the excitement of the new product. I'm looking more for football cards. The thing that's kind of interesting too is you've seen the 90s insert folks. That's really been dominated by basketball going back in time. When you have the late 90s, the Michael Jordan and the Ray Allens and the Iversons and all that sort of stuff, those collectors. But what's happened here over the last couple of years is there's been a huge focus on Barry Sanders and Jerry Rice PMGs, being essential credentials, football, Peyton Manning, and these sorts of things that are selling for huge money. There has been a shift over into those 90s, those rare 90s, the numbered cards, a lot of money pouring into that sort of stuff. The one thing that hasn't really caught on that I've seen yet, vintage football, which I think, again, I've been talking about this for years. I've always thought that vintage football is a big opportunity spot, especially when you compare to other sports, the popularity of the game and that sort of thing. And not necessarily all vintage football. I think, man, there is so much opportunity there when I'm comparing across all sports and sports cards. Another important piece here is we have a clear GOAT in football. Especially after this last Super Bowl. I mentioned in a video, I'm a little concerned about Patrick Mahomes winning another Super Bowl, and he's the only challenger to Tom Brady as far as accolades go. And just the way his career has started, it's been a meteoric rise. To go to 7 straight AFC championship games to start your career, that is obviously unheard of. And the only other player that you can say, oh, this is unheard of and this is crazy, is Tom Brady. But the way that Mahomes lost, the fact that he's lost twice head-to-head to Tom Brady before Tom Brady retired at like 45 years old. And keep in mind, this is at the end of Tom Brady's career. This was not prime Tom Brady. But the fact that he's lost to him directly twice, Tom Brady is in that clear zone of GOAT. I think that's really important. I think it helps in basketball as well. I know people will say LeBron versus Jordan. Some people think it's LeBron. It's not. It's Michael Jordan. But I think that's really important in basketball as well, because you can use that as a comparison tool. When you're looking at Tom Brady pricing, and then you can kind of compare against for a lot of players and figure out if that's where you want to spend your money. So we have a clear GOAT in football, which I just think it's really important. Also, this is something that I think is not talked about enough. The collector opportunity, and again, speaking to young people here on the singles market, there's a lot more focus around wide receivers and running backs. I know a guy that actually flips offensive lineman cards. And so I know a lot of people will say it's just a quarterback-driven league and it's a quarterback-driven card market. Sort of. That is sort of true, but we are seeing more money put into guys like Justin Jefferson and some of these really important cards for high-profile skill players. And even defensive players, we are seeing that. So that is something that is new. The fact that you do have a big drop-off in price for a lot of wide receivers and running backs that are really exciting players, I think that's great for the collector base. Again, I'm thinking about average Joe families that are just trying to buy single cards of players that they like, maybe on their favorite team. I collect Alvin Kamara, and this is a perfect example of where I can get great cards of Alvin Kamara at a fraction of most quarterbacks, even scrubby quarterbacks in the NFL. And I love it. I love the fact that I can get gold prisms for Alvin Kamara for relatively low prices. And so for young people that are building a collection, maybe it's a binder, maybe it's just they've got their 3-row box that they're putting all their top loaders in. You can buy skill players or players of your favorite team, and it just doesn't cost. You can buy singles of these guys, and it's very affordable. And I think affordability in the hobby, something that is tough these days on the singles market, it is there for football cards outside of the hottest quarterbacks on the market, even on the vintage side. Take a look at some of the vintage in the 80s players. My God, the ungraded cards or the mid-graded Dan Marino rookie cards from 84 Tops or whatever, this stuff is not expensive. So football, I think, offers a great opportunity. And yes, I know, careers are really short. So I'm not saying here that ultra modern buying expensive cards of rookies is a great idea. I wouldn't say that it is. But there's decades and decades and decades of football cards to take a look at. And I think it's going to continue growing as a space as the league is so damn popular. All right, friends, that's all I've got today. I think you can tell I'm just missing football on Sundays. Stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.